mallet. I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is now 6:30. Gosh, I'm trying to think. So written comments submitted by 3 p.m. on the day of the meeting. Complete speaker card. It's everything on the agenda here. For the rules for citizen participation, speakers be limited to 3 minutes. While public criticism is not prohibited, disorderly conduct or disturbance of the peace as prohibited by law shall be cause for the chair to determine the offender's speak. We are now going to start this meeting at 6:30. And the Pledge of Allegiance, I'm going to give to Councilwoman Rangel. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do not have any ceremonial matters, proclamations tonight. Citizens be heard. I have a couple cards for one of our agenda items, and we have a couple of citizens to be heard. I'm going to do them separately tonight. So we're just going to do citizens to be heard. Speaker petition instructions are provided in writing at the beginning of the agenda. The Texas Open Meeting Act permits a member of the public or a member of the governmental body to raise a subject that has not been included in the notice for the meeting. However, any discussion of the subject must be limited to a proposal to place the subject on the agenda for the future meeting, and any response to a question posed by the City Council is limited to either a statement or specific factual information or a citation of existing policy. Texas Government Code 551.042 has not been posted on the agenda. We have 2 citizens to be heard. We have one written, and then we have one, I think, that is here. So we're going to do the one that was written in. It's going to be by Patrick Kane are you here, Patrick Kane? No. Okay. 1123 East Cedar Street in Rockport, Texas. At its core, local government exists to serve citizens, bringing citizens into the local governing process in what makes a government more effective, more inclusive, and ultimately more successful at serving its community. This can only happen if the city is transparent, and that is become a major issue at the city of Rockport. Agendas used to be uploaded in plain text. They're now uploaded as scanned images, which denies access to visually impaired users who use text-to-speech technology. The scanned images also prevent indexing by the search engines, which means citizens can no longer search the agenda archive for a given topic. Important information is now being regularly omitted from the agenda packets. Here are some recent examples. Number 1, there was no agenda packet for the June 25th workshop on the Tax Increment Reinvestment Zones. Number 2, there is no information on agenda item 11 for the June 25th City Council meeting with regards to having RBC Capital solicit bids for the gas system. Number 3, there is no information on tonight's agenda item 11 regarding tax increment reinvestment zones. Number 4, there is no agenda packet for tomorrow's budget workshop. The agenda packets allow citizens to provide input to our representatives. Why are we being denied this opportunity? What I'm asking to do is to motion to postpone any agenda item that isn't included in your agenda packet. If this motion fails, I'm asking to vote no as a matter of principle. Your decisive actions will send a clear signal to the city staff that you value and engage citizen-based and that you want time to consider important topics in advance of the meeting. Okay, and then I believe this person is in, you want Andrew Kane? Can you come up?
Andrew Kane, 2106 Lakeview Drive. I want to reference my last time I was here a month ago on the June 25th. What's happening when you want to get a statement on about the expenses water petition PUC process has been. Maybe you just haven't been paying attention, but the reason why we're still in it 27 filings later and your attorney's bills are adding up is because the city hasn't done what the judge has ordered 3 times. So in February, the city sent a proof by declaration. It's basically a statement saying we refunded $104,000 of water service and $24,000 of sewer service. So we refunded the customers. The PUC staff said, please show your work. The judge ordered on April 18th for the city to show in native format how many customers were refunded and how it was done. The city failed to do it. The judge ordered again on May 22nd for a June 15th deadline for the city to show how the refunds were done in a native format so they could verify it was done. The city didn't respond to the deadline. It's in contempt of court with that judge. So the judge ordered again, I'm gonna give you another deadline, June 15th, show the refunds. On June 15th, your lawyer responded, we can't do it. We need more time. It's been 5 months. So why are we still here? The city says we did it, we can't show it, take our word for it. It's $130,000 that y'all refunded for 3 months of illegal billing. How in the world can the city not show in 5 months where the $130,000 went? It's unbelievable. I mean, y'all had to refund it. Y'all had to go through a process, identify them, and refund it. But I cannot believe your accounting staff can't show a report of credits and refunds. Yes, we could drop the petition, but we have a responsibility to the people that we spent getting the petitions to make sure they got them done right, and the city's been saying for 5 months they can't show it. It's unbelievable. I bill more money per month than the city does. I have more customers per month than the city has in the water department. And I get it done with $150 a month software, email receipts, email invoices. I can run acceptance reports. I can run refund credit reports. I cannot find it believable the city can't show where $130,000 went. You're in contempt of 3 judges' orders. And that's why we're still here. Your attorney just keeps prolonging and prolonging. I know you're talking about tomorrow, that's why I'm here today. But y'all got to hold the city staff accountable. Where did the $130,000 go, and why has the judge ordered 3 times and the city has failed to show where the $130,000 went? How many customers? They can't even say how many customers were affected. It just said how many customers have been refunded and where did it go? Show it, and the city just can't do it. Y'all pay a consultant for billing. You pay another consultant for sending out bills. What does your staff do? Because I can do it by myself on 15 locations. 13,000 customers storage bills, and another 200 RV bills with utilities by myself in about 2 minutes on my software. Y'all got something wrong with your accounting department. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kane. We're now going to go into the consent agenda. The following items may be acted upon in a single motion. No separate discussion or action on any of these items will be held unless pulled at the request of a member of the City Council. Would any of you guys like to pull any item off the consent agenda? Otherwise, I would like a motion.
Make a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Can I get a second?
I'll second.
Okay. All right, we're going to go with Ward 1.
I didn't call for it.
I have.
You want to do it right now?
No, we have to do the call because I already made the motion. I'll do quorum after it.
Okay.
Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4. Aye. Mayor is absent. Thank you, Councilman Rangel. We're going to call for a quorum. Ward 1.
Here.
Ward 2.
Here.
Ward 3.
Here.
Ward 4. Here. Mayor is absent. Okay. Agenda item number 6. We're going to do ordinances, resolution, public hearings, special events. Hold a public hearing to receive comments for or against the proposed ordinance. So do I have to just open a public hearing? Right? The public hearing, do I just open it? Okay. I am holding a public hearing for the proposed ordinance of the special events. Who's talking? Who's talking on that?
You want to do the resolution first?
Yeah. Oh, 6:38.
She just turned it on. Oh.
I don't have that.
So some of this y'all heard last week during the regular meeting on July the 12th. And the city council requested that we postpone it so that we could make a few corrections and at the same time hold a public hearing. So what this ordinance is to help create a special event ordinance. This will help us to know what's going on in the city, as well as to be prepared for if an event grows from 100 people to 500 or 1,000. It also allows for other benefits for the city to reoccur or to collect some of the expenses that that are coming out of our budgets without, that we are not prepared or we know about in advance. So if you want to take it.
Yeah, and the majority of this is what we covered last time, but we'll go over it again. Some of the challenges by some of the special events that we have faced in the past is public safety. These large gatherings of people that we have in our community require public safety and police officers to be present as well. And so this ordinance will require a certain number of police officers depending on how many people are present. As well as traffic management. It's one of the big issues that we have in certain areas of town whenever we have a large exodus of people leaving at the same time. That has to be managed, otherwise they're just all going to get boggled up, which they have in the past as well. Some of the noise and environmental impacts, we've had these calls as well. We've had complaints of noise and intrusion from some of the public events. This will address that as well. As well as resource allocation, which is the need for additional public services such as sanitation, additional employees, and policing that constrain some of our resources that we have on a regular basis. Some of the rationale for creating this ordinance is obviously regulation and control. We have to have some kind of regulation and control for these events that are in the city limits. The ordinance will provide a clear framework for the approval and regulation of special events. And this will also ensure that all events are conducted in a safe and orderly manner, minimizing disruptions to the community. There's a permitting process established with this ordinance. It's establishing a formal permitting process that will help the city assess the potential impact of events and allocating resources. We can review this. We can decide how much that we need, and the ordinance actually spells out particularly how many police officers we might need for certain events. Some of the safety standards, the ordinance can set forth specific safety requirements such as crowd control measures, emergency response plans, and sanitation standards to protect the welfare of attendees and residents, and to mitigate some of the negative impacts for people who are not involved in these events as well, by outlining guidelines for noise control, waste management, safety plans, and traffic planning. The ordinance can help mitigate some of these issues. Also, one of the biggest issues is revenue generation that it has, because it costs the city money, a large amount of money to put on these events. Whenever we have traffic control, whenever we have waste management, whenever we have cleanup and police services, we need to recoup those costs as well. So this ordinance covers that. The ordinance does include a uniform application with detailed information that it has, and I believe you all have the packet. There's an application fee that's involved with this as well. There's a permit process for all events within the city limits of Rockport. There's time frames and there's deadlines involved with it as well. It addresses street closures. It all requires the city manager's approval for any special event to be authorized. And the city council can hear appeals if the city manager does turn one of these down, so for whatever reason. There's requirements for bond and insurance and other cash bonds as well for their ordinance as well. Continuing on with that, the event information, the location is also included. It has event components, street closures, security requirements, requirements for traffic and safety plan, trash plan. But what we included in the packet, what's new, is the communication form. There is now a reduced rate for nonprofit organizations, and there's clarification on the insurance bonds or the cash deposits for city property only. The approval process, there's a set of deadlines included in the packet as well. A special event approval team will meet to review the application and make a recommendation and possibly require additional documents if we find it necessary. And the team will consist of the city manager, the city secretary, the parks department, the police department, and public works as well.
So there's, regarding the fees in the special event guideline, so there's a fee schedule that's part of the ordinance. It's before you. There is also, the special event guideline will be created once the ordinance is adopted, and that will be like a quick reference for anyone who's going to apply. It will help them go through the process much faster. And then conclusion, this is just basically to help us balance the benefits of the special events and the need for public order and safety. It also puts all the expenses on the event and not on all taxpayers.
All right.
So now do you want to have the public hearing?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is a public hearing, so anyone from the public would like to come and speak or ask questions, now would be the time. Then I close this public hearing at 6:46.
Council, have any questions for staff?
Oh, sorry.
Do you have any questions of staff?
Do you want me just to go to number 2 though, and then?
I'm sorry?
I was gonna go to number 2 and then if they want to ask questions. Number 2, consider the approval on first of 2 readings of ordinance 1940, amending Code of Ordinances Chapter 86, streets, sidewalks, and other public places, by deleting Article 5, parades, and replacing said Article 5 as special events in an attached form as may be modified in the future by ordinances, adopting penalties for violation of this ordinance in amount not to exceed $500 per violation, repealing all of other ordinances in conflict therewith, providing for severability, effective date, and the publication postponed from the July 12, 2024 regular meeting. Shelley?
I'm just available, and so is the chief in case you have any questions.
Does council have any further questions? Were they satisfied with what they mentioned
All
there?
the changes that we requested last council meeting seems to be taken care of.
I did have one question that came up to me today, and I had already kind of mentioned to y'all. The navigation district has the festival grounds, and they were wondering how it affects their events that happen on their property.
Do you want me to take that?
You want me to start it? And if I don't?
Yeah.
Okay.
There you go.
So having the people, the vendors or the event holders fill out an application will help us with knowing what security companies are in town. It'll help us with help the chief knowing if he has to have additional police officers. It will help with, so we're aware of what events are in town. It will also help with traffic issues before they happen.
Are they required to do this? I think is what they're wondering. It's because it's navigation
I would say
property.
absolutely. Yeah. We're gonna have to put on extra police officers, extra communication people if it's a large event. Sometimes they use our barricades, which that's addressed in there. If they don't need any of that, that's great, but we know who's in town and what's going on. And the chief can make the call as to whether or not he's gonna need additional people there. You know, if he needs 1 or 2 officers, are we gonna charge for it? Probably not. But if he has to staff full up, then yeah, we're gonna need to charge for that. Yeah, it's for the town. Everybody that's having an event needs to fill it out.
Okay. And you guys will reach out and let them know what's going on there.
Keith and I have discussed, yes.
Oh, along the same lines, Keith is in my ward and called me about this, and their question, Chief, you may chime in on this. If the event itself is happening on a piece of property that is belongs to the navigation district, that's one piece of information, but the streets and all of the surrounding areas, and I'm assuming you currently provide police protection for navigation district property now, right? I mean, so.
As an example, for the 4th of July, we're all hands on deck. We had numerous police officers that are supplied specifically to the beach because of the amount of traffic that happens on the navigation district on the beach. And it was a large amount of money that came out of our budget that the navigation district was unable to pay back. And so this event will help fix that.
Okay.
And so as an example, and the city manager may have a different opinion, but as an example, the fireworks show is what drives the 4th of July. And in my opinion, they're a nonprofit organization. They would be the ones required to complete the packet.
Okay, so the NAB district's question of if it's on a NAB district piece of property, that doesn't exclude them from this, because we're already providing police and a lot of other things in the streets, and it's kind of a moot point. It doesn't really matter. Still within the city of Rockport, and we're providing all kinds of services around it and what have you. So I think that answers their question.
An example would be market days. It doesn't generate anything that we necessarily need to do anything extra.
Correct.
You know what we need to do? We need to do like, sorry, on the fly here. We need to let them apply for all of those events in one application, because we'll be dinging them every.
I'd say like market days is a monthly.
Yeah, so we need to, we'll put together something specifically for the NAB district. That's the primary user. It'll be just for them to make one application for all of their events. We might need to break out like the 4th of July or something big going on and have those separate, but we'll be logical and fair, but maybe just like for market days and the things that happen regularly, we just do one application fee. Y'all opposed to that?
Yeah,
It makes sense.
That's perfectly fine. Yeah.
It makes sense. So I'll put that together. It'll be logical.
We don't need to change the ordinance for that, right?
Nope.
I don't think so. I was just going to comment that I was able to listen into the last meeting, and y'all brought up a lot of good points, and thank y'all for that. I think y'all covered anything that could have been covered with questions. I just wanted to point out that this is not affecting things at Memorial Park, birthday parties and small events, because I think that's covered in there. It's the number of people, 300 or greater. So the question was raised to me about parks, and if I have a kid's birthday party, do I have to do this? And I said, no, just read the ordinance. But I want to make sure that I'm reading it correct. That
The guideline will help with that too.
small events like that don't matter.
We're not coming for your front yard barbecue or anything like that. Just if it's going to have an impact on police, roadways, things like that.
It's definitely for events, large events, like the Crawfish Festival that we've had several years now that we didn't have any control over traffic or they hired officers for that event, but not nearly enough officers, and those officers were strapped. Any street closures that we have in the downtown district, that's what this ordinance is meant for.
All right, I think y'all did a very good job with it.
Any other questions?
I move to approve item 6 as presented.
I'll second that.
Okay. Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Motion passes. For the okay. Agenda item number 7. Consider approval of resolution 2024-15R, amending the authorized representatives to transmit funds for investment in TexPool Prime and are each further authorized to withdraw funds from time to time, to issue letters of instruction, and to take all other actions deemed necessary or appropriate for the investment of local funds. Robbie?
Thank you. Good evening. What this is just some cleanup. We passed a resolution back in October of 2023, adding Vanessa, Teresa, myself, and Lorenzo on this document. And with Teresa having retired, it's just some cleanup. We're now trading out Teresa for Shelley in her place. And this is for the TexPool resolution.
You guys have any questions?
Move to approve item 7 as presented.
A second?
I'll second.
Okay. Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Motion passes. Agenda item number 8, consider approval of resolution 2024-16R, amending the authorized representatives to Texas Range and Investment Service for public funds, providing an effective date, and finding and determining that the meeting at which this resolution is passed is open to the public as required by law. Robbie, you again.
Okay, thank you. This is also changing. Again, Vanessa, Teresa, myself, and Lorenzo had been added on that resolution back in October. This is trading out Teresa for Shelley, and this is for the Texas Range Investment Pool.
Any questions from council?
Move to approve item 8 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay, Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. All right, motion passes. Agenda item number 9, consider approval of resolution 2024-17R, authorizing city representatives in matters pertaining to the city participation in the Texas Community Development Block Grant Program. Kim?
Yes, ma'am. This resolution is basically another formality in that we're adding some names to the TDA Go website to allow the staff to input data for the Holly Road and Kluge Trail grant that we have. So this is just adding Robbie as the finance director, myself, and the admin assistant there in, admin manager in Public Works.
This is essentially just adding names to those.
Yes, and they're not authorizing names. It's to enter data into the system. It's not to authorize checks or anything like that. That still holds with the mayor and the city manager.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions, council?
Move to approve item 9 as presented.
I'll second.
Okay. Ward 1,
Aye.
Ward 2,
Aye.
Ward 3,
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We're now going to agenda item number 10. Consider the approval of a request from the Tree and Landscape Committee to utilize funds from the Tree Preservation and Mitigation Account for the purpose of purchasing 24 Tans Frost 20-gallon watering bags in the amount of $300. Carrie?
Good evening.
You guys are up there so fast.
Yes. So this is a request to purchase the tree watering bags. There's some really nice photos in there, and we need 10 now, but we wanted to go ahead and get 2 dozen so we'd have some for when we needed them and didn't have to wait for them. Also, I'll be coming back to you with an ordinance revision so that there can be a dollar amount, not to exceed amount, so that we don't have to keep bringing back these little things to you. It would only be for allowable expenses too, so.
Does that need to be by ordinance, or can it just be authorization? It does need to be.
Right, so
Gotcha.
probably the next council meeting I'll have that for you.
Okay.
Any suggestions on the amount? I'm thinking
We had, what, 5,000?
1,500.
5,000.
Wasn't that the amount? Was it 3,000?
I don't know what kind of amount you want to do.
5,000 would be, you authorize them to use, right?
We could go to the CM for 5,000 or less? 5,000. Okay, I like that.
I'm fine with that, and it's just coming out of the tree fund, correct?
Right.
And it has to be an allowable expense. They're not gonna go spend it on sodas and
Yeah.
snacks.
Yeah.
Some
We
of
can't
stuff
go,
like
we
this
can't
and
go on a
like
cruise or
trees,
anything, so.
Like tree replacements, things like that.
Yeah.
so
Right.
we're not having to come back
Right.
here and do that. So, the trees need the watering. We're dry here, so, I mean, they're very passionate, the tree committee, getting these bags and putting it on, so I was at the meeting and
Yes.
I will.
There's a couple of spots that we have no way to get a watering system to them, so.
Council have any other questions?
I'm gonna buy it myself for my property.
There you go.
Thanks for
Are they
providing
handy
the
looking?
Amazon link.
Yeah, and you can take 2 of them and zip them together for a
Yeah,
bigger
I see
tree.
that, yeah.
Thank you for the pictures and everything. That helped me understand what you were trying to do. I'm looking at, that's a neat product.
It is.
Sounds like it's fairly economical and save some trees during dry times like this. So
Yes, sir.
good job.
All right, I will take a motion from someone.
I will approve agenda item 10 as presented.
I have a second. All right. Ward 1.
Aye.
Ward 2.
Aye.
Ward 3.
Aye.
Ward 4, aye. Thank you. All right, agenda item number 11, receive a presentation on Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone and provide direction to staff. We do have a couple citizens to be, or agenda items for citizens to talk and a couple to be read. So we're gonna do that first here real quick. Okay. So the first one is going to be from John Jackson. Mrs. Goodwin, my name is John Jackson, a fifth-generation resident of Rockport of 312 Olympic Drive. I want to reiterate my support for establishing a a TERS for the greater downtown area to promote vitality and the growth in the downtown, in addition to increasing funds that will help pay for the infrastructure improvements and drainage in all of the downtown. It will specifically encourage Sonry LLC's pending development on the Rockport Harborfront land, which is a development that includes retail, commercial, a hotel, a boardwalk, and public park, providing air. We sold our waterfront acreage to the Rockport Harborfront LP, owned by the Bass family, and I always envisioned a multi-use development similar to today's proposal. All previous development on this property has faced challenges due to the size, scope, and remediation cost, exorbitant cost to install infrastructure, as well as the cost absorbed when the land swap occurred several years ago in order to realign the property lines between the Bass interest and the Aransas County Navigation District. A TERS can finance public infrastructure without raising taxes while enhancing quality of life in downtown redevelopment. With other 400 TERS in Texas, a TERS is available an instrument establishment by the Texas Tax Code for helping with the projects just like this on this property. All prior attempts failed without a TERS, and this development hinges on establishing a TERS. We waited 35 years for this, so I strongly feel this is time to make it happen. And then we have a written comment from Jennifer Day. I don't think she's here. 902 East Cornwall Street. Hello, my name is Jennifer Day. I live at 902 East Cornwall Street. My husband Rusty and I own a business in the downtown culture district, Angel Rose Bed and Breakfast. That is restored 1881 historical home with state and national historical designations. Like many residents of Rockport, we have often dreamed of a visionary organization that would help develop our downtown harborfront into a place that could be enjoyed by residents and visitors. There has been numerous attempts, but without an innovative public-private partnership like the proposed TERS, it hasn't been realized. Over 400 other Texas towns have used the approach to further civic and commercial development without any increase in taxes. I believe that Rockport should also partner on this initiative for the sake of our infrastructure improvement, culture, and economic development. And then we do have a speaker from the audience. And Andrew Kane, did you want to come talk?
Andrew Kane, 2106 Lakeview Drive. So it's very disappointing, as I've been there, seems like hundreds of meetings, that agenda packets show the presentations. It's just really easy to include it in our 200-300 page. Sometimes it seems very intentional that things like this are left out of the agenda packet. So when I have to come speak before they do the presentation, I have no chance to read it. And I think it's disrespectful to y'all too that you didn't have the weekend to prepare your questions and you're asked to give direction on something I thought it should be in the agenda packet. I'm speaking here blindly. But what a TERS is, you can make it sound pretty, a TERS is, let's take all the improved property taxes from this area. Instead of going to the general fund to help the general public, it's just going to go back to them in that little section only. So let's look at this downtown area. The EDC, which I was a part of at the time, Chamber of Commerce, the city staff, and a big pack said, let's do the downtown anchor project. Courthouse, Celebration Plaza, and City Hall. The downtown anchor project, the citizens invested $60 million. And what we told, it's an anchor project. Why are we calling that? We invest $60 million of the citizens' money to downtown. It's going to revitalize downtown. It's going to bring new development. Bringing new development, it's going to increase the property taxes of the businesses downstairs and bring in new development, which is going to lower your property taxes because all that increase in property taxes is going to go to the general fund, which will offset us paying it. What the TERS is trying to do is say, let's take all that money and put it back into just ourselves. And in reality, what it is, it's a developer kickback. It's a tax abatement on the developer. He's going to get the money back. I am against, even though I've done 25 properties averaging $10 million a piece, I've done development, it's a developer kickback. A TERS by law, and this is going to get challenged, so trust me. A TERS by law is to promote growth in an area that's blighted. Read the law, blighted. Thankfully for the newspaper being here, when this came up about a month ago, the little caption with a picture presenting this from the developer, she goes, if we can't do our development, another developer is going to grab this desirable property and do another development, might be condos and stuff. So that own statement by this developer is saying this isn't blighted property. If we don't do this project, somebody else is going to develop it. So on that statement alone, how do you even think you have a legality to pass a TERS on it? The citizens spent $60 million on a downtown anchor project to bring in development downtown to lessen our tax burden. And you want to keep those fruits of our taxpayers and just redevelop it to a special section. It's wrong. You lied to the citizens about the Downtown Anchor Project. What ain't done with the Downtown Anchor Project? Let's let it see the promised growth downtown so the citizens will have the benefit, and the general fund, police, we always need, will have the benefit of the increased property taxes downtown. It's our investment. We deserve it back, not the developer. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now do the presentation.
Mayor and Council, a few, maybe months back now, we had talked about the downtown, the vast property development, and Travis came and gave us an overview of what basically a TERS was. Now he's run the numbers, and he'll have a more in-depth presentation for you and what we could expect from the project and what we could expect to be invested in infrastructure. And so then after you have his presentation, if you have any questions, let us know.
Great, thank you all. Good to be here again, Travis, James. I'm going to give a recap of what we talked about last time. So some of this will be some similar information you've heard presented a little bit differently. I've taken some information from the developer and their build-out schedule, and so you will see a revenue forecast for how much revenue this one project could generate and how a split would work. So I know there are a lot of questions being asked. Again, it's an economic development tool to pay for improvements within a designated zone. It's covered by Chapter 311 of the Texas Tax Code, like most laws are. Just so you know, this isn't new. There are 464 TERS in Texas as we sit here today. Doesn't mean you should do one, but just so you know, there are 194 cities that have TERS. Some cities have multiple TERSs, whatever the proper plural is. Houston has about 20 of them. 70 counties participate in TERS. So again, these are being used all over the state. I mentioned last time the comptroller produces a report that tells you where these are, who's participating, what the purpose is. There is no tax increase. It does not raise anybody's taxes. It's created by a governing body or by a petition of 50% of the property owners based on the appraised value. Cities can allocate tax. This chart, a little bit hard to read, but it just shows you the growth. This data is from the comptroller. They don't produce 2022 data. They show you the previous year. So you just see the growth over time that the number of TERS have increased across the state. In fact, in the Express News today, I was reading it before we started, and they're talking about using an existing TERS to pay for a new Missions baseball stadium. The Mission Stadium in San Antonio is on the south side of town, and they want to put it on near the old Fox Tech site. So the paper at least reports they're thinking about using an existing TERS to help pay for that project. Pays for public infrastructure to attract new businesses and encourages development, thereby increasing your property values and long-term property tax collection. It does reduce the cost of private development by providing reimbursements for eligible improvements. Again, state law tells us what's an eligible expense. You just can't pay for anything. The state law outlines what would be an eligible expense. You heard from the developer. I'm here on behalf of the city. I'm not here on behalf of the developer who presented last week. They talked about the public infrastructure costs that make developing this site hard. They can speak to those specifics. It wouldn't be appropriate for me to talk about their project. Here is a list of the eligible projects that you can pay for: roads, sidewalks, demolitions, facade improvements, affordable housing, public buildings, school buildings, economic development, and other projects. Again, this is all listed in Chapter 311. It tells you what you're allowed to do and what you can't do. As we talked about before, I think it's sometimes hard to get your head around, and we showed the little triangle. If you remember, we talked about the base value and the new development. I hope this one's a little bit easier, but you have the existing value today. All the revenue that the taxing entities, that they participated in the TERS, would go to the general fund like normal. It's that future growth at the bottom. You can't read what it says, but it says new developments and appreciation. You could share some of that. So some of that funding would go back to the city's general fund, and some of it would go to the TERS account to pay for eligible projects. You do not have to send 100% of that new money to the TERS. You can split it 50-50, 60-40, 70-30. That is up for you to decide how much money you want to put in that account. So a simple example, if there was a 25-cent tax rate and the base value is $1 million, $2,500 continues to go to the general fund. Let's say after 5 years, we've added $4 million. Okay, so we got a $5 million total. So that first 2,500 still goes off the top to the city, and if it's 50-50, you split that $10,000 that's generated off that new $4 million of development. So the general fund would get an additional $5,000, and you would send $5,000 to the TERS account. So does that make sense to everybody? So the first 2,500 continues to go to the general fund like the TERS never existed. For that $4 million worth of growth, you get to send all or a portion to the TERS account. So I'll just stop there. Does that make sense to everybody how this works? If there is no growth, then there is no money that gets split, right? It stays that original $2,500. The baseline stays the same. Just want to make sure everybody understands that. So you don't have to send 100%. You can pick. So in theory, when these work well, you're generating new growth. You're generating new development that would not occur. And so the city would be better off by participating in the TERS, by promoting economic development, bringing projects forward. How funds are you served?
Before you switch the screen there, it's okay to throw a question in?
Absolutely. Fire away.
This example that you gave of 50% right here, 50% goes to the general fund, so that gets a little extra money, and if the council so chooses, they can send the 50% back to the developer. That 50%, it can be 70-30, it can be 60,
Correct.
We can do whatever we
Correct.
want, and what have you. Okay,
And
so
let me also be clear, it does not automatically go to the developer. It goes to a TERS account, and you can spend that on public infrastructure. You can spend that through a development agreement with a developer.
Okay.
So you're not obligated to spend the money. So in theory, you're putting the money in the account because you want to spend it on things that cause growth to occur. You are not obligated to do any type of rebate, incentive, pay for any kind of public infrastructure with that. That's a decision that they would have to submit a request to the TERS board, and then that has to come back to city council for approval. So you would always have oversight and approval on how those funds are spent. There is a TERS board like we talked about, but they would make a recommendation to you all, hey, we think this is a good project, we should pay for these sidewalks, we should enter into an agreement with the developer, and then it comes back to you all to decide. But when you create the ordinance that we talked about, I know legal's here, you typically define the boundary, which we talked about last time, that I'll go over again. You talk about the number of years the TERS is going to be in place, and you talk about what that increment split is going to be. So you kind of outline that up front. Any other questions on the math? I know the tree pictures were better than the economist up here. So I hope this slide's a little bit easy. So again, that base value in this example, you will always collect that $2,500. So if you set up a TERS in downtown, I'll show you how that would work as well. How are TERS funds used? Everyone knows the expression pay as you go. Typically, as cash comes in, you save it up and you spend it. If you could reimburse a developer for expenses, so what's pretty common, I think what's being contemplated, or at least the conversation so far, the developer would pay for infrastructure up front, you would pay them back over time with cash. So as they build their project, they generate that TERS account increment, they get paid back. They don't generate any increment, they don't get paid back. Typically in this scenario, the risk is all on the developer. There is no risk to the city. Some cities choose to issue bonds. So let's just say this TERS is wildly successful and there's way more money than we need, and you all say, let's issue a bond to pay for sidewalks or pay for something. You could issue debt, and you would work with your finance department, make sure you had the right coverage ratio, that there were enough years left in the TERS. You can also create what's called a local government corporation and assign their revenue streams. That's complicated. People don't do that. But these are sort of your options that are allowed how to do that. We talked about this last time. I call these my 2 key rules. You can't have too much residential at the time it's created, not what it looks like at the end. We talked about some master plan communities that were greenfield. They were ultimately 80% residential, but at the time of creation. And the other one just says you can't have too many of these based on how big you are as a city. That wouldn't be an issue here because you don't have any TERS. Okay? We talked about this a little bit last time. These are the steps you have to go through. You have to create what's called a preliminary project and finance plan. As I said, I do this all over the state. I'm working in Seguin for their downtown, doing that right now. You have to publish a notice just like you always do. 7 days in advance, you have to have a public hearing. You just had one of those tonight. Then it gets approved on second reading. Then you designate a TERS board. And there are rules. You have to have a minimum of 5, no more than 15. If we're so fortunate to get other entities to join, they also get a seat on the board. Sometimes you add them to your 5, sometimes they replace your 5. You know, every city does it slightly different. You can work with the city manager and legal. Everyone does it different. People tend to keep it smaller just because it's easier. It's just easier to find people, especially in large cities that have lots of boards. We talked about last time, it's not real exciting to sit on the TERS board the first couple of years, because it takes time for things to get built and that tax revenue to build up. So that TERS board may only meet once or twice a year, right? Because there is no money to spend or development agreements to have. We create what's called the final project and finance plan. That has to be approved by both the TERS board, and it comes back to you all for approval. And that you get to outline what are eligible expenditures and what you don't want to pay for. So just because state law says you can pay for a laundry list of things, you can choose not to include them in your project plan. So if you don't want to pay for sidewalks, you don't have to list that as an eligible project. That's up to you to decide. Most cities have it broad, so we don't know exactly what may happen. For example, on an old HEB site, some of these infill projects, you know, you want to have some predictability. And then last, you have a board of directors that makes recommendations. So typically, someone comes to them, they agree, they say, yes, we approve it. It has to come back to you all for final approval. So there is that sort of checks and balances. The meetings are open, they're transparent, they're meeting minutes, they're meeting notes, just kind of like a standard board that you have, nothing different. We talked about the downtown core is based on your downtown plan and some other work you've done. We talked about the properties in the downtown TERS. If you remember, those are the different state land use codes. There's some, the appraisal districts list some things as waterfront, which is not a state land use code, but they list some as waterfront. You have the EX, which are exempt properties. Some are owned by public sector organizations like the NAV district, other are an arts center, other are city properties. So you have different kinds of exempt properties. You know, religious institutions, organizations count. So there's different types of exempt property. F1 is going to be your commercial. RL is residential living. There is one of those in the district. And then that X is going to be public sector property. So those are your land use codes. It does comply. We went over this last time. This is preliminary 2024 values. Remember I talked about that baseline of $1 million in my example? Your baseline, now again, these are preliminary, so they got to get certified, but let's just say they don't change. The baseline value would be $29 million and change. So all the tax revenue, you know, your rate goes up and down. If you remember last time we talked about your tax rates go up and down all the time. So it's whatever tax revenue you generate off that $29 million flows to the general fund. So if your tax rate doubles, you get more you're getting today. If you cut it in half, you get less. But the calculation is all the tax revenue generated off that $29 million goes to the city's general fund. Oops. Yep. All right. So I'm going to jump ahead to this. This is what you get right now. These are what the taxing entities get off that $29 million. I list the tax rate for 2023 to the left. The county has the county, the road and bridge. I put the NAV district in the city. That's how much they get. Tax rates, you know, everybody gets $225,000, and then I just multiplied it by 25 years. So if we did a 25-year TERS, most are between 20 and 30 years. A lot of cities extend them, but most set them up just because development takes time. So most big projects, you know, we put the TERS in place, they do the planning, it takes 2 years to build a phase 1, then they take 2 years to build a phase 2, then it takes 2 years to build a phase 3, and sometimes the payback is 10 or 15 years, so you need that 20 or 25-year runway. Does that make sense? So right now the city's collecting about $100,000 off the downtown with that tax rate. If you kept TERS in place for 25 years, you'll get 2.6 million. So I just wanted to show you all, this is the baseline revenue that each of these jurisdictions are getting off that. All right, so what did I do on the forecast? I assumed that 25-year time horizon. I held your tax rates constant. Tax rates historically had gone up for a while, but then as property values really increased with low interest rates, tax rates went down. Now that as people are protesting values, tax rate, you know, the tax rate kind of goes up and down, and y'all do that effective tax rate calculation. So tax rates kind of bounce around. I held them constant. I assume properties appreciate at 3%, 2.5%, 3%, that's pretty standard. I assume no new sales tax. The developer provided me a high-level build-out scenario for the Rockport Marina Village. They presented that to you last time, if y'all remember. Scarlett stood up and she walked y'all through her project, so she can speak to that. It's a couple $100 million worth of development. I did not assume any development on the old HEB property, even though it's in the TERS, and if we want to sort of forecast what that might be, we could do that, or any of the other vacant land in downtown. So that land would likely, could redevelop. You can't scoot the screen up, can? Okay, we can't scoot the screen up.
I will tell you that council sees it a little bit better.
Okay, so what you see there is I picked a 60-40 split. So based on appreciation and based on the $275 to $280 million of development they're contemplating, if you did a 25-year TERS and the city put 60% in the TERS account and the city kept 40%, the TERS would get about $16.2 million and the city gets about $10.8 million. Does that make sense? So you're collecting that base value that we talked about. This is all of the growth. That's a combination of 3% appreciation plus the developer's project. I phased it in based on their build-out schedule. It's about a 5 or 6 year build-out schedule. They've got a couple phases, and remember they showed us the site plan and those things. So they've got a couple phases to phase, and I think it's 2029, 2030, and maybe 2033. So this gets phased in over time. The county, same split. $14 million would go to the TERS if they participated, $9 million to the public sector entity, road and flood, NAB district. So the total, if you did a 60-40 TERS and everybody participated, the TERS would get about $34 million, and the public sector would get $22 million. And so they can speak better than I can. They have some high infrastructure costs, the bulkheads, the roadways, the sidewalks. So you would have $35 million in this TERS account if they built their project according to schedule, according to plan, that you could use as a reimbursement for their project to pay for the infrastructure. You could choose not to give them any of it. But that's how it would work on a 60-40 split. So I'll stop there for a minute. Does that make sense? So, I think they are going to come to you, no surprise, which is why I was brought in by Vanessa. They're going to come to you for they believe they have a fair amount of public infrastructure that would be eligible for reimbursement. The process would be, you need to kind of know what the numbers will be. You would create the TERS, you'd go through that process, you'd have a TERS board, then you would enter into a development agreement with the developer for whatever you chose to reimburse them for or not. So going through this TERS creation process does not obligate you to ever enter into an agreement with the developer. You just have to put this tool in place, try to get the other entities to join, and then the one TERS would enter into an agreement with sort of this pot of money, which is those public sector entities collaborating. So they're sort of working on a deal with that one entity. I'm sorry.
So if, say, just as an example, the city and the navigation district decide to participate and the county objects to it, then we would only collect from the city, road, flood, navigation for the total, correct?
Correct.
And not that it would occur, but only one entity could go into it as well?
Correct. And some do for different reasons. Everybody has a different reason for why they enter into, whether you call it a public-private partnership, whether you call it an incentive. Every community has its own needs when it comes to community development and economic development. I think of the city of Kyle, right down the road from Austin. They really want restaurants and retail so their citizens don't have to travel. They get 50% tax abatements and sales tax reimbursements for the first 3 years to just get restaurants. Other cities don't do it that way. So I think it would be most effective to get as many entities participating as you can, because ultimately the developer has their costs. They'll have an ask of the public sector in general. And so if the county does not participate, they would need to try to negotiate a separate agreement with the county or not.
Just while we're still on the page.
Yes.
I know that you had just said one could participate alone, but would that also be applicable to the navigation district? Are they capable of a single participation in a TERS and creating their own?
I don't believe the navigation district can create a TERS. I believe only cities and counties
So
can.
we can only do it in combination with them, or the county with them?
So I'd probably defer to legal and want to look that up about how navigation districts could do their own agreement, but there's probably ways that they chose to enter into some kind of cost sharing or, you know, development agreement, or however they're leasing the property. I mean, and so to be clear, the NAV district would still own their property. They would enter into a ground lease, and the developer would build the property.
The statute only allows the county and the city to determine enterprise zones. That's where the navigation district is limited. They have no ability to determine what an enterprise zone is, which limits their ability to be the self-creator and sole entity within a TERS.
So they can only choose to participate with one or the other. I got you. Thank
And
you.
what's most common is the city creates it. School districts are allowed to participate. They tend not to, because we talked last time about Robin Hood. College districts do. So Del Mar College participates in Corpus Christi area in TERS. Downtown Victoria, the college district's participating in a downtown TERS because they own a theater in downtown and they want to see the growth of downtown because they own facilities in the downtown. So they chose to participate. Other college districts say, you know, no, it's not our mission. It doesn't impact us. But again, it's most effective with everyone coming together because the belief is you'll be better off with this development. You know, with just the flooding, with the bulkheads, with just what's required, you know, I think there's probably a reason these properties haven't developed for 30 or 35 years. There hasn't been a lot in the zone we've talked about, other than what the Arts Center's done. There hasn't been a lot of new significant private sector development. You know, new buildings, new structures, those kinds of things.
Can the county create a tiers in the municipality without us participating?
Yes. They typically, I mean, sure, there's probably a reason, I don't know, maybe local politics that works that way, but it's most common for the city to create it, then the county comes in and joins. Most times entities tend to join at the same terms, not always. So if you say we're coming in at 60%, it's unlikely they're coming in at 100. So you know, we have these conversations, people know what's going on, and so what I see across the state is the county will say, yeah, the NAV district will come in for the same terms you're coming in for. The other thing that you can do is put a not to exceed. So I do a lot of this work in Cameron County. The county says, okay, we're comfortable with this, but no more than an amount, or we have the right to leave. So there are different provisions and different safeguards you can put in place. You can change the boundaries we talked about. It's always a little bit easier to get it right the first time because you have to keep track of 2 different base years. You can change the increment. Now you get into what your interlocal agreements say, but most of them leave it constant. Your development agreement with the developer says you can't lower it or raise it. If you issued bonds, you have to keep it the same. Your bond covenants would probably tell you you can't adjust it or shorten it. But again, if this is successful, you know, you can shut it down early if you don't have any debts or obligations. If this doesn't go anywhere in 5 years and you're not generating any increment, people are frustrated, you could also terminate it. That's another possibility. If you terminate it and there is a balance in the accounts, that money gets split proportionally with the folks that put the money in. So if you put in half of it, you get half of the balance. If the county puts in 25%, they get 25%. So the money, whatever balance, goes back to the entities. So this is what the forecast would look like. What's common, again, is a developer would say, I'm going to come ask you for a reimbursement. You say, yes, we agree. Here are the terms and the conditions. They build whatever they're going to build. And then as the money flows in, they submit their invoices every year and they get reimbursed if the money's there. And it may take them 10 years to get paid back, 15 years, and the risk is on them. That's the common way these are done.
And it is performance-based. If the money's not there, the city's not on the hook for that.
Correct.
That infrastructure, those costs.
Correct.
The developer can't come back against the city and say, look, we were in the tiers and we agreed to it.
Because your development agreement would say we're only going to reimburse you if the funds are available from the TERS account, right? I mean, so you put all those safeguards in place and they know that. So the TERS is what's doing the reimbursement. And again, what's not uncommon is, you know, there's economic cycles. Interest rates are high. It could take a long time. They may run out the clock and it may be in year 25 and they might ask you to extend it for a few years and that council could choose to do it or not do it. But that development agreement will set out the terms and the parameters, and you all would obviously have to approve that as well.
Okay. I have two other questions.
Sure.
You kind of touched on it just a second ago, but how would we get out of a tiers if it's non-conforming? That's just by ordinance, or just dissolving the tiers, I guess?
I'll take a crack at it first. You have to have a public hearing. You dissolve them the way you created them. You'd have a public hearing, and then you'd have to vote to dissolve them.
I guess that'd be dissolving the board, and then...
Yeah, the board goes away, the zone goes away, it ceases to exist.
And then each entity that entered into the tiers would essentially have to do the same, or...
You would be the only entity that, since you created it, you would be the only entity, you would end it, and I'd have to look at what the interlocal agreement says, but it would say if y'all leave, they leave too. So all of those things get spelled out. So yes, the short answer is if you dissolve it, they would also say we're out of the TERS as well, and you would return the money.
And then, so forgive me, but I did read the tax code, which was fun. So 311, so 311.005, the criteria for the reinvestment zones. Can you? It was stated earlier that this is blighted. Would be the only. It is not blighted, and it would be challenged. But reading this, it seems that there's other. It doesn't just have to be blighted. Correct. There's a list of
faulty sidewalks, unsafe condition, layout. So the first bullet you're referring to, there's 4 ways, and then again, I won't play attorney, but there's a bunch of lists on the first one, and then it talks about a petition of property owners being the last one, which is another way. Now, if you have a petition from property owners, your board composition is slightly different. The state senator and state representative would also have a right to be on the board. They typically don't. The other one says if the area is predominantly undeveloped, which this area is, more than 50% of the property in this zone is undeveloped. So I believe there are a number of ways that this TERS would qualify, but I'll...
Just based on the discussions, there's eligibility there. Of course, it's all going to happen. It's all dependent on whatever the final development looks like in order to be able to make that determination for sure. But obviously, you'll have the ability to make those legislative findings when that's needed.
I think that's all I had. Sorry.
No, I'm here all night for y'all.
Your example of the potential is 34 million total if everything went perfect there. I know we're talking about potentially designating a TERS zone, and we've got one developer that's looking at doing a project, but the zone is much larger than just that project. And I'm assuming the hope is that other projects will spring from it and what have you, and they'll come to apply to the board if they so choose and what have you. But this 34 million potential, hey, that's what might happen here. Was that based on that zone with that project only, or all?
So it was 3% appreciation of the baseline. So just right, the property's worth 3% more, next year, and then 3% more. So a little bit comes from just appreciation. The bulk of it comes from their property. But so yeah, so if you thought, so I have it factored in, let's just say the old HEB property. They may come to you and say, we have this plan. This is what we want to build. We're asking the TERS to reimburse us for what we believe are eligible expenses. You would need to factor that revenue on top of this.
So this 34 million, again, I know that's just a number we're kind of looking at.
Basically from the one property presented last week.
If the particular project that those folks are discussing comes to fruition and what have you, it could possibly produce this. But if all of these other areas in this zone, if we choose to do this, I mean, this number could be substantially larger if other projects are attracted and happen and produce revenue and produce tax revenue.
This does not include, we talked last time, TERS only have real property, not personal property. The developers, which they can speak to, a hotel, so this does not include hotel tax the city would collect, and this does not include sales tax. So I should have made that caveat. This is just the property tax impact from their project. But yeah, and in theory, the investments that you make with them, other people can tie into, so hopefully you don't have to incentivize every project. I mean, hopefully developers, the area is so attractive that you don't have to incentivize projects, and you use that money to pay for sidewalks, streets, drainage, flooding. You typically are going to pay for a couple of these big catalytic projects, and then you get that smaller scale infill, You get more people coming to the downtown, revenues go up for the businesses, so you may see enhanced sales tax from this zone. But again, let me just restate, just because you do a TERS does not mean you ever have to give a developer any money. That's a determination you make down the road based on what they ask for and what you choose to enter into an agreement with. But if you don't have this tool and ask the other entities to join, then you don't have the tools. We talked about last time, that's a little bit of the chicken and the egg, why a lot of cities go forward with it, so the tool is in place, they get the other entities to join, and so they can then go have those conversations.
Yeah, because this is only our second discussion on this so far, very initial, has there been any conversation with the other folks mentioned here, the county, NAB, or they go, hey, this might be coming, any inkling of whether they'd be for or against at this point, or?
I know that everybody's been, we've had a discussion with every entity, either us or the developer. I don't have any certainty, they all have a board that votes as well, so.
It sounds like the city can, just as an example, just to say road flood decides that, nope, we don't want anything to do with this. Or the county, as Brad mentioned, we can still move ahead if we choose to, if they say, hey, we're not interested. So this could still happen if one of these entities decides they're not interested, is that correct?
Yes, and they could choose to join down the road. I mean, every community has its own dynamic. And so sometimes it takes a year or two, or for other reasons they choose to join. But the idea would be, again, the order of magnitude of the infrastructure, I think, would probably require most entities to come together. And so I think it's a little bit, and what I think is most common is that most people look for the city to make the first move. Okay. Once you've, because conversations are great, but once you say, hey, we've created this TERS for 25 years at 60%, come join us, listen to some of the projects that may come, then it gets more real. Otherwise, it just kind of stays in this abstract state where nobody knows. And so I think that, and I can answer all your questions, but so if you wanted to proceed, here's how we normally proceed. Direction from you all to prepare the preliminary reinvestment zone financing plan. They're short. It's sort of a build out of the revenue forecast and the justification and working with legal on them. They would handle the ordinance. You'd have a public hearing. So for example, to lock in the base year 24, we have to get this done by the end of the year. And so some communities don't mind rushing, and they don't mind me being down there at Thanksgiving and Christmas. Others try to get it done a little bit sooner. So if you wanted to move forward with this now, as an example, you could hold a public hearing on August 20th. So to do that, you'd have to have an ordinance drafted. You'd have to post a notice in the newspaper 7 days in advance, and you'd have to have that preliminary project and finance plan. So you would have a public hearing just like you had earlier, and then there's still 2 more votes. After the second vote, the TERS becomes real. You created the TERS.
What is the very final time we could hold the public hearing? I know August 20th is what's set, but what is the absolute latest?
You'd have to look at your calendar. So you'd have to have 2 readings. So you would do second reading your very last meeting in December. Most don't, in case you don't have a quorum, and then the meeting before that, you could have the first public hearing and the first reading.
But we have
October, November, December, we only have 1 meeting.
Mm-hmm. So do you have an estimated extension of public hearing date outside of August 20th?
Tell me that again.
What is the date, the council date at its greatest extension for a public hearing that can still accomplish this by the end of the year?
So the last opportunity for the public hearing would be September 10th to give any wiggle room, 24th if we were absolutely at dead latest, yeah.
But if you hold the public hearing in August,
right,
and it's just pitchforks and brimstone, and then we come with the ordinance.
well, you can hold the public hearing without, I mean, ideally you would have the public hearing and the first reading and the vote on 1 meeting, but you don't have to. You could certainly have the public hearing on the 20th and then go ahead and put the ordinance first reading on the 10th. I mean, even do another public hearing if you wanted to.
But it's 2 readings, so we could have the public hearing and a vote, and then you could have an additional public hearing, second vote.
and a vote. Yeah, you could. I mean, you can do it any way you like, but,
Well,
yeah.
I mean, we're just trying to meet that.
You can have the public hearing on the 20th and do nothing else. And then on September 10th, you could have your first reading and vote, and September 24th, have your second reading and vote. Did you growl at me? Oh, okay. So, yeah, that would work.
Would that give the other entities, do the other entities need to join by the December?
No. But we would have these conversations, and I think they would know and see what you're doing. You would start talking to them in more formal detail.
Yeah.
Again, I'll tell you what's common. I would start, and this is good, I would start coming down and making a presentation similar to what I've done. Sometimes council members show up, or the mayor or city manager, to each of those entities to get them educated. They join through an interlocal agreement written through the attorneys.
Okay.
So, but what's common is, let's go talk to them, let's see if they have any feedback, and we're sort of all moving together. And so they don't have to join by this year, they can join at any time. It's better while the momentum is there, because as a reminder, we still would have to we'd have to appoint the board, I'd have to prepare the final project and financing plan, the TERS board has to approve it, and then the city council has to approve it, not the other entities. Well, no, you just have to do that at some point, not by the end of the year. But if you're trying to work with a developer, they're going to probably want you to move on some of those items so you can then enter into an agreement with them for their project. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I call them zombie tours. I get brought in to clean up these. Everyone gets excited and they get through number 5, and then they slow down and they forget to do number 5, and then they got a project, and so we kind of rush to write the plan and get it passed and approved. So my recommendation is these are most effective when you don't lose momentum. You can always come back and adjust and amend them. So you don't want to go too fast so people don't feel comfortable, but you don't want to take too long that you just don't ever get it done. Because until you get through number 6 and council approves it, you can't technically spend the money.
So I guess tonight we just gotta give them some direction. Are you guys comfortable doing the public hearing on the 20th?
I'm always going to be an advocate to hear what the public has to say about something that directly affects them. So I'm going to push this out, especially since it's within my area. I want to know what the merchants have to say. I want to ensure that they're well educated. You've given us a lot of benefits, but where are the disadvantages of this? It has to exist, and to properly weigh any valid decision, we need to know the disadvantages. So can you tell me the disadvantages that especially my merchants are going to face within that area for this development? That I feel like this feels to me like more of a partnership for development than infrastructural improvement. I don't feel like, I feel like if we should do anything within that area, should be an absolute support from my merchants. And it should be as what we have needed, which is the infrastructural improvement. But I feel like this is more of a convenient partnership now that we have a developer coming in. So I want to know, where are the disadvantages, the actual transparency disadvantages that could be faced within the boundary of that area?
So the first disadvantage, I think we talked about, I don't remember, is that nothing happens. You go through this process and you create the TERS and people get really excited, and then nothing happens and people get frustrated. Hey, why do we spend all this time, effort, resources talking to the county, the NAB district, and nothing happens? The downside for the businesses, I mean, in theory, if you're making investments that they would like to draw more traffic and fix sidewalks and improvements, there is no tax increase on a property owner. A property owner doesn't have to do the calculation. Finance does in conjunction with the CAD. They say, here's the roll this year, here's the roll that year. A disadvantage is that, you know, a business owner just doesn't like a project that you're funding. They may just say, I disagree. Another disadvantage, and I guess it just depends on your view, you are segregating some money that doesn't go to the general fund. You are putting money in that special TERS account. You are likely going to be spending it on public infrastructure in partnership or in conjunction with the developer. And I think the development team can speak about the sidewalks and roads and the bulkheads and all the public spaces they presented to you last time. So merchants might like it because they say, hey, it brings more people down. You know, not liking the project would be one. Some people are just against the government being involved in promoting economic development or public-private partnerships. I don't know that I say that's a negative. That's just more of a philosophical, we just don't think that's the role of government.
So as far as like affordability, okay, of our business owners down there, the tax rate's not going to increase, but the assessed value of the property is, which therefore in return is going to increase the dollar amount that is going to be owed every year. And with greater development comes that greater overhead, right? So, I mean, is there a downside to this zone where some of my small businesses down there may not be able to afford to maintain as that growth occurs?
Sure, that's possible. I mean, I think part of why the assessed value goes up is because those businesses are more profitable and there's more activity, and the value of those businesses go up. But you're right, there is a scenario in which I think unlikely that the property values are going to triple and they don't see any increase in traffic. But you're right. I mean, you make any kind of investment though in the downtown, and that's true probably whether you use a TERS or not. I mean, I guess you could make the argument that if you invest in more streets, sidewalks, you fix the flooding, those add more lighting, open spaces, band shell, that probably makes downtown more valuable, regardless of the funding source.
So did you?
No, go ahead.
If we look at the businesses that are existing down there, what Stephanie mentioned, good questions. We can choose as a council, as we direct this TERS, if we choose to do this, the businesses that are there could benefit from the new sidewalks and the street lights. And typically when a project of this magnitude goes in, there's going to be more foot traffic down there. They might potentially shop at their place as well as this. And so there could be some benefits for those folks from traffic count and what have you, as well as just, again, lighting a park, splash, about all the different things that can go in down there. So those existing businesses could benefit from what we spend the TERS dollars on. If we choose to say, okay, we're going to put new sidewalks in down here, we're going to spend this dollars that were created, put in the TERS account, so they could benefit from some of that, right?
Correct. Okay. And I would say you also have more money in the general fund.
Because we wouldn't take the dollars and just put a sidewalk in front of this particular project. We could spend it anywhere in that TERS zone.
Correct.
And what have you. And it would behoove us to try to spend the money fairly and intelligently across that zone, not just, even though the dollars came from that particular investment that happened in that particular part of the TERS, we can spend those dollars in the TERS, right?
Correct.
Okay.
But it is fair to state the prioritization of the projects are going to be within the board's discretion, and that they would bring those projects to us to finalize. We wouldn't have control over prioritizing them. So what's important to us within our areas may not be of priority to the board, where they may seek greater development, where we would want to seek improvements of infrastructure. Go ahead.
You guys determine the board.
If you all appoint the
But
board.
it's still, I mean, it really still does offset our involvement.
Well, you
and
can put your
prioritize.
business owners, you can put a business owner from there on the board, so they're represented.
And even if the board brings us a project, let's just say that whoever this board is that doesn't exist yet, they bring us a particular project and they think it's great, it still has to pass council.
Correct.
If we look at it and go, wow, this is not something we want, we can, I don't want to use the term override, but we can say no to that board.
Yes. And some of those things you could outline in a different way to think about it. What's more common on the project and finance plan, if you don't want things to be an eligible expense, then don't approve a plan that has those as an eligible expense. So that goes back to the risk of having it broad is that lots of things qualify, but then you're not constantly having to amend your project and finance plan. But if you're dead set against sidewalks, to just pick something, or lighting, then in that final project and finance plan that we create in step number 6, don't remove sidewalks as an eligible expense, and then they can't bring you those projects.
And then also come in front of council and we say no, we can go back to the board and like, well, they said no because this is what they would like to see.
Yeah, I mean, in theory, you're appointing these people. I tend not to see, or you just work with the board and through staff and just say, we're comfortable going to 60%, 60% incentive, not 50%, or we're okay paying for lights on this side, but we'll pay, we won't pay for those lights somewhere else. I mean, I think your other thing about the downside, and you need to be careful for those. I mean, if you think this is all going to happen without the TERS, don't do the TERS. I think the amount of infrastructure required for some of these projects is going to require some level of public support and assistance. So then it's a matter of what tool do you think makes the most sense? And does this tool make sense in collaboration with the other entities? And so some communities look at that chart and say, we'd rather get the 40% because we don't think it's going to come unless we have the TERS and we make these infrastructure investments. But that's each city's determination to make.
When is the Downtown Merchants monthly meeting?
It's summer, but they're not having anything set until September,
They don't have
October.
anything set.
But they would allocate some time, it's just participation is not going to be.
Okay, I just didn't know if you guys would.
I've been in touch with them. Yeah.
Okay.
So one of my other questions is, I of course am going to advocate for my area, but I feel like it's only fair to also consider our city as a whole and not be narrow-minded into just worrying about my ward. We have a lot of unmet CIPs as it is that we can't afford. How is it fair of us to allocate money into one particular zone when we can't meet the needs of the entire city at this time?
You're asking me?
I'm just saying, it's kind of a question and a
Logically, because
statement.
we'll get $10.8 million into the general fund, whereby if we do nothing, we get nothing. We're increasing the general fund by 10.8. Yeah, we're putting 16.2 back into downtown, which is a fair use, but then we're putting another 10.8 into our general fund that we can use to fund a CIP, whereby we get no development, we get no
So is
anything.
there a way to ensure what is pulled from into the general fund goes into a separate fund for improvements outside of the zone, so that there is some type of fair
You guys can use it for whatever you want. You guys get to,
But do you understand what I'm saying?
yeah,
Like,
that's part of your budget process.
You would do that near the normal budgeting cycle?
Yeah. It just becomes part of the pot that you have to do V&E, vehicle and equipment replacement, CIP, buildings, whatever you need. It just becomes part of the money to approve for whatever you want to approve this year.
So if you see the $10 million go into our general fund, when we're doing our budgeting process, and you see, maintenance, and you see roads and repair, or you see infrastructure on the line items, we can request to them, hey, we want to put this much on there, or like, that's what we go through.
Well, we wouldn't have the same restrictions as the TERS does on improvements, though.
No.
We would
we
have
can do
both.
whatever we
We
want
could
with the money.
Yeah, we could complete any CIP.
And just to be clear, that's
What I'm
over
saying-
25
This
years
is-
total. Yeah,
That's what I
right.
was going to say. This is over 25 years. So say you get $1 million, $500,000, you're going to get $500,000 the first year. It goes into the general fund. You can use it anywhere in the city on anything you want. Well, anything we're allowed to spend our money on. But you get to do that as part of your budget process.
But there's nothing outside of, if that's something, a discussion that we have to allot that money to CIPs, right? Is that something we can build into this ordinance, or is that just this council's discretion?
That is a year-to-year discretion. I don't think you can encumber the money for future years.
Have you ever seen anyone sequester the money, that 40%, that over 25 years, that almost 11 million, if that happened, about $1 million a year, or no, I guess over
I said
25,
$500,000.
500,000. Do we have the ability to sequester that 500,000?
I defer to Lee. I think every year that council has the right to do the budget. And
We could know what the,
you can't bind a future council. You could ask finance to say, hey, how much is the 40%? And then you could choose, each council would make that. And I think that's a very fair point. I think a lot of cities think of downtowns a little bit different. Some communities think of downtowns as everybody's downtown. It's in your ward, but downtowns are always treated public sector costs for you, and they only get repaid if they get their development.
So I was gonna say that this would we know there's a lot of improvements that need to be made downtown, the infrastructure improvements the city needs to make. This possible developer is gonna make those improvements. We pay them back over whatever the time period is, if it's performance, but that also clears up, right, our ability to borrow money to do other projects
Right.
within the city that we're not allocating our bond
It's off our
capacity
books.
to downtown.
That part is, the 60% used for the improvements in the zone is off of the city books. So we can use that and even say, we can, tell me if I'm wrong, in our documentation of that 60%, we can say, we can reserve 10% of it and say, this has to be used to repair Austin Street over, can we get that specific?
You can, most would just say streets,
Streets.
because, I mean,
So-
I think the reality on this one is the developer to jumpstart this is probably gonna require a good
Right.
chunk, if not all of that 60%. The hope is you get other development to come, the HEB site goes, you're not having to offer incentives to other people. You're also getting more sales tax revenue and hot.
And hot tax. This doesn't affect either of those taxes, and our sales tax primarily comes, I think, well.
And so you all would just have to decide, you've seen the improvements they've talked about. Again, I'm not, you've seen them, I've seen them, like you have street improvements, playscapes, open space. Is that a public amenity you want? You have them pay for it, and they have to get reimbursed performance-based.
But, yeah, of course, this is a budgetary issue. It allows us to put money in those areas that we know we need to spend money on in those underserved areas where we've annexed but don't provide some services to. I think that it allows some of that capacity for us to borrow money that we don't just throw in downtown, would be my idea.
Well, and at the first budget work session, if you guys come and say, I wanna know what the 40% is from the TERS this year, and I want every bit of that allocated to a capital project, that's what we're gonna present to you in the budget plan. So you get to decide how to spend it, and then it does give us more money for capital improvements, and like Brad said, free up some borrowing power to get some other things done.
And this infrastructure that could possibly be installed by the developer, and then if we choose to do this and reimburse a portion of, it sounds like the city's got to do this anyway. At some point, somebody's going to be developing down there. We're going to have to do a lot of this work if we can get the developer to pay up front for it, and then we pay them back out of the higher taxes. So these infrastructure things that we can choose to reimburse for, sounds like most of them have to be done anyway. They're probably on a list somewhere that needs to get done. We don't have the money for it.
And they're public, so if they put in a park, that's a public park. It's not private to that development. If they put in a boardwalk, that's a public boardwalk. It's not, they can't get reimbursed for anything that's kept private and not accessible to the public. Only public infrastructure is eligible.
Any other questions?
I just have one more thing.
Sure.
So the area in which the development wants to utilize, a portion of that is navigation district. How does that affect, since you can't collect real property off of that?
You would opt the improvements, not the land.
Okay.
The improvements would pay tax, but not on not the value of the dirt.
The screen that you showed that had that 34 million, I know that's a number we're just kind of looking at if.
Yeah.
And we look at, and I know you based it on 25 years. There'll be other councils in the future when all of us get to retire and go fishing. Once this is paid back, the 34 million over 25 years, they could potentially be in that TERS fund. Then that's not going away. There's those dollars, tax dollars every single year are gonna come into future budgets and what have you, substantial. And by that time, we're no longer paying that developer back. And there may be others that happen in the meantime,
Correct.
but those are gonna be other dollars.
Correct.
That 34 million, again, if a portion of it is paid back to the developer for those infrastructures, that has 25 years sounds like a long time, but that's a lot of revenue for the future of the city. That after that 25 years goes, I'm assuming, right into the general fund after that.
Correct. Once the TERS terminates, cities do one of two things. You can either extend it and you modify your project and finance plan and you keep spending in the zone and keep kind of doing what you're doing. or the tourist terminates and all that money flows to the general fund. I've seen people do it both ways.
I have one final question just for clarity. If a bond was brought within this, it would come to us council to approve before established, correct?
Yep.
Correct. We also in that project plan have to list it as an eligible funding mechanism. So if you all say, and you think, and you get feedback, hey, we just don't even want that to be an option, we don't have to list it as an option. Most people list it just because you don't know what's going to happen, and cities can borrow money a little cheaper than the private sector. So some cities, oftentimes you're paying the developer's interest as well, the interest costs. So if you can issue debt a lot cheaper, it may make more financial sense for you to issue the debt, pay less interest, and save some money. But you got to have a coverage ratio. I mean, that's 5-10 years down the road. That's not,
I lied to you on that. Is there a way, like, if that, it can be considered, sorry, that, like, say, any uncommitted money at the end of the year, so that this doesn't become like a slush fund, right? We can pull that back to the general fund? Can that be within our ordinance so that it can go to other projects?
I think the agreement with the developer would say you can't do that until they're paid back first.
And full?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now you're down on the weeds on the development agreement, so you may say we're only going to reimburse you from the taxes you generate on your property as opposed to appreciation. Other cities say, no, we're okay giving you the whole pot because we can pay you off faster and terminate this thing faster. So now it's kind of down in the weeds.
So that would be something that could very well, we're talking about uncommitted, so
Well,
if you choose to pay the developer
I don't think you
first,
You have to hold the pot of money to pay them back the amount that you've committed. So maybe after you have the full amount in the TERS, even if they've asked for it or not, anything over the full commitment could be.
Your ordinance could say, well, I have to think, if your ordinance says you're not going to put in more than a certain amount, and you completely paid them off, you would just terminate the TERS. You
Yeah,
wouldn't
that's
keep
what
it
you
in.
do.
I don't think you're allowed to do that, but I probably would want to double check. I don't think you can do, I know what you're saying, what other cities will do is you'll find, so if you make that project list broad, sometimes what you'll do is instead of using city funds to pay for a sidewalk repair, you'll use TERS funds.
Yep.
So if you make your project list broad, a way to do what you're describing is make your project list broad, so if you have extra funds, have the TERS pay for lighting repair, or sidewalks, or repave a road.
And that could take some of the pressure off the general fund.
Correct.
For the
Yes.
3 to 5 years.
So as opposed
for
to
this small
doing
stuff.
what I think you were trying to describe, you would just have the TERS pay for a city project as if it was in the CIP or something. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I promise I was done.
And listen, I don't mind, I mean,
Hold on
if,
to the public hearing.
yeah, so, and I don't mind it, and I don't want to speak for the city manager, but, if the merchants want to meet online on a Zoom, I can do this presentation.
I think it's extremely important. It's going to be important in my decision.
Okay.
Because, I as
Sure.
a full city I represent, but also they're my focus. So as much information, I'll push the participation if you can provide the information.
I can come down again in person. I can do it virtually. Some people like doing it virtually because merchants are busy and they don't want to show up in a place. So if you want to do 8 o'clock coffee and breakfast, I can show up. If you
I
want
think
me
they like evening and wine.
I love it.
They will show up.
And they'll provide you a place.
I like it.
Okay.
I think, are we good with the 20th to hold the first public hearing?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is
And
that,
do you guys want to do the first reading that day, or do you want to wait until?
I think we should wait to see what our participation is in that public hearing, and then we can make a decision to move forward on whether we want to, because we can always postpone the first reading and hold another public hearing. So you can always put the first reading on August 20th. We can make a motion to postpone for another additional hearing to encourage participation. I don't feel like we should rush this.
So
We have time, we need to encourage the public's participation.
Art just mentioned the public hearing is on the ordinance, so we will at least have a draft ordinance by the public hearing. And then you can take the vote at a later date.
We can have the first reading at that meeting. If we
You
need
can have
to
the first
propose
reading,
it,
yeah,
we need
and
to
then if it's
propose, like she's
horrible,
saying.
you kill it, or.
And it may be helpful to have the first reading, like at the beginning of the public hearing, that way the folks can hear it and maybe understand a little bit more, may change.
So the ordinance will be in the packet and available online.
I would appreciate if we can get that, but like I know it generally posts Thursday, Friday, but if you could provide more time for review on that, even if it's just that portion of the packet. But I think that, you're already working on it over there, or what?
That's between those two. So as soon as they have it to me, and I've proofed their typos, I will send it to y'all.
So let me make two comments. One, if you want me to come down and talk to the merchants before the 20th, I absolutely
I think
can.
you need to do that.
So sometimes this time of year, for us, my partner, me, we got to work around different clients, and city councils meet on the same date, or county commissioners court. So I know the 20th works for me, at least on that public hearing, but we can change it. I can definitely come down before then and speak to the merchants. So if you would like me to come down,
I'll get with Vanessa, we'll get with them and figure something
come
out.
up with a couple dates, and I can come down whenever folks need me to. Let me ask you a question in the ordinance. Does that 60-40 split that I showed you, does that seem, 25 years, 60-40? I mean, does that seem reasonable?
I think it's gonna be whether you get all three to participate, right?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. I mean, I think my recommendation is that feels like the right split you're going to need to pay for the amount of infrastructure in this zone. I don't know that you want to go much higher, but.
So I think the split would be good for the developer if everybody participates. But I think more importantly, the split is probably something that is reasonable and good for us. So if nobody else joins, it doesn't matter. That's still a split that we can tolerate.
So I have a question. It was mentioned that if the county chooses not to participate, and this is a city NAV participation, and it's not enough funds for the developer, and they say, I'm sorry, we just can't do it, then we move forward, right? The navigation's locked in.
Yep.
And then we can still make downtown improvements.
Yep. With either the natural growth.
Correct.
Or if something else were to come in and improve the values, that same increment would be captured. It does not have to be this project. And I also just want to note, so that it doesn't get convoluted with anybody, Travis is our consultant. He's looking out for our interest. Yes, we have a developer in the queue, but he's here to protect us. They bring their own people. So when he's telling you stuff, it's in our interest.
It's what's sort of standard. Like I said, listen, I don't think it works here. Some people put 100% in their downtown because their downtowns are historic, relatively built out, and so that 100% isn't a lot of money. I don't think that makes sense in this circumstance. We all have so much need. I don't think the public would want you to put all of it in the downtown. 60-40, I think, seems a reasonable based on what other communities do. Some do 70-30. Some come in at 100% the first 5 years, then they go down to 90%. And I think it's probably easier to pick a split that works for you. It makes it easy for them to put it in their financial models. So sort of my recommendation, sort of what's standard, is a 60-40 split, 50-50, 70-30, that ballpark, in about 25 years.
Is that in the development agreement, or is that in the tier?
That's in the ordinance.
Can we get some examples of whether we do a 60-40 developer cost, how quickly we can get them out of the, you know what I mean, like paid off, whatever, so that we can kind of know what we're going to be able to allocate after this?
Would you like to take the development that is on
in
the queue and take those numbers and do them at a 60-40, a 75-25?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to see it. I support development, they're not my priority.
Right.
But I support development and improvement. That is where I'm at. I want to see what we can do with this money outside of that development.
Right.
If you need to include it, that's great too. I just want to see
So let me ask this question.
and how soon.
They're probably going to ask for $35 to $40 million. They believe they have that order of magnitude, and they're reworking their plan now with the NAV district property. So just so you know, that's the sort of ballpark they're going to come ask you for. You can choose to do it or not. A question for you is, do you like the TERS, or do you want to get out of it as fast as you can? Because one scenario says put in 80% for a shorter number of years, and then you can shut it down. Other cities say, no, let's not put as much in, so more money goes to the general fund, but it means we just have to keep it in place longer.
So I guess let us know if that's on the term periods, what we're capable of doing, because we have to sustain the general fund as well.
Yep. Well,
Just examples.
I'm sorry.
Can we see it as 50/50, 60/40, 70/30?
Yeah,
With the development that is in queue?
we'll pick some. We'll also pick some opportunities if we go higher, you know, we would pay the developer off sooner and then have the growth in the TERS to reinvest in downtown. If we kill it, what goes to the general fund? Travis will do a couple scenarios.
I wouldn't like to see it, if we're gonna do this and it's gonna get approved, I don't wanna see a time frame in which just benefits a developer
Right.
and not my downtown.
So if we can do a list as well
Yeah,
of the things that we can do
Sure.
with that money, that is, so people that are gonna come to the public hearing and people are gonna, we
So
can see that.
he has that up here.
Yep,
Well, this wasn't in the, I mean, like, ahead
Right,
of time.
this will be online
Yes.
this will get,
after the thing, but that's the list right there.
so another way to think about it is if you like the project, again, it's kind of the chicken and the egg, what you want to commit to. If their number is sort of 35, 40 million, we may have to match, we may have to set the TERS up to try to come close to matching that. But if, let's just say we kind of come close to matching it, that still doesn't obligate you to doing a deal. You still then have to go negotiate a deal with them. So we probably also want to keep in mind how much money we think the developer is going to ask you for. And then you can still say, no, I'm only going to give you 10 million or 5 or nothing, right? I mean, but.
Yeah, if they're asking us 40 and we only say, we're only feel comfortable with 10, that's part of the negotiation, that's part of the development.
Correct, but you may want to at least think about what they're going to ask you for. So if you choose to give it all to them, and that's conversations you need to have with them, you've seen the presentation, I think you'll talk to them, that's going to be the ask, so you may want to come close to matching it. And then, again, you still have to do a development agreement that legal rights that you have to approve. Sure. So setting this TERS up, one more time, setting the TERS up, let's just say 60/40, isn't obligating you to spend it on anything with anybody. It just puts this tool in place. Then there's a bunch more work and negotiations.
Is that development agreement, when that time comes, is that a public meeting as well?
I don't think you have to have a public hearing.
A public
Development
meeting,
agreement.
is that done in?
Oh, yeah, you have to approve it in a public meeting.
But it's not a public hearing.
No, I'm sorry, not a public hearing, but the development would present their, I guess when we come to the development agreement, that would be.
It's in the agreement.
It'd all be in the agreement, and that would be a public meeting, we vote on it.
Correct.
Right, brought forth by the tiers board, or the board already approves that development agreement, or no?
There would be an agreement with the TERS board and the city and the developer.
Yeah.
And they're written slightly different ways, but yeah, I mean, it would be, I guess the short version is yes, it would be a public document. People would understand what you're doing and what the deal would be with the developer.
I think my last concern is to ensure you guys provide us the surety that this is based on the boundary in which you've proposed. It meets the criteria under law. I don't want to get where we're bending it to suffice. We know that it's going to be scrutinized.
Right.
So I need to know with 100% certainty that we are within the boundaries of the law and it meets criteria before you know what I mean?
Yep, so.
I don't want to waste your time building an ordinance.
No. Travis and I have looked into it pretty extensively. Travis is a pro. I don't think have done any that are illegal. There's none.
You can't believe
There's one that's
that.
being touted as, the model for wires will be illegal, and that TERS probably was created illegally, but.
Have you drove down there? Have you gone in and actually visualized yourself?
Yeah, I try to say my folks, my dad and stepmom retired here, so I'm very familiar with coming down here for decades. So I'm very familiar with the property and where it's located and the restaurants down there and the arts center and all that stuff.
Basically, you're saying undeveloped land is what's meeting criteria because it's greater than.
I'll let Art talk about that, but the ordinance will outline the findings for how you're justifying creating the TERS.
We were actually approached to make the boundary bigger, and we did not think that would be pertinent. or not necessarily illegal, but not in the best interest of the city.
You'll make the finding in the ordinance that it's legal, and it'll be outlined for why it's justified.
Speaking of boundary only because it was mentioned soon after the flooding we had from Albert, right? Or Alberto. You cannot extend the boundary just along the water line and constructional improvements, correct? So we could not extend the boundary down Water Street in order to bulkhead it.
You can extend the boundary, you can extend the boundary however you.
On water line only.
Water line, okay. It's
No,
most, I'm just trying.
We don't own the water line, we only own the road. The property owner on the east side owns the water side on the west. So the city only owns the roads. So if we extend the boundary down there, we're only gonna improve the road because we can't improve private property with the turfs.
You could maybe do an economic development. I'd have to think.
But also, if you included that area, you'd be hitting over 30% residential potential.
Well, you could just pick up the right of way of the road, and let's just say the east side of the property, and then I'd have to go recalculate, is it more than 30%? There's probably a way that might be a public sector improvement, so that might be an eligible expense. I just have to think about that.
I just wanted to say, because a lot of people really was like, oh, that, right after the flooding, I just don't want empty promises and hopes. That we need to be real transparent on what this is, what it's going to do, and not put, dreams out there, because flooding is a huge issue. It is impactful to our health, our finances, our home. So
I wouldn't even know what something like that costs. I don't even know what that costs, so I wouldn't tell you today it makes sense to put in without knowing what that costs and how much money would be left over. I mean, if you said that thing cost $50 million or $70, I have no idea what it costs.
And as of right now, that waterfront line is not a priority within the boundaries that we're setting within this church. So that's what I just wanted to provide us clarity out there to the public.
And we need to crawl, and let's start small and see how it works.
We can always do another tiers, but
have some successes, and then if we want to grow it.
I just wanted to ensure that was, because that was something that was put out there. It's not a priority within the boundary that's been zoned out. This is the boundary.
The red line is it.
Okay.
And that's where you said the downside earlier is making people think something's in there when it's really not in there. So it's more I'd say the politics of the local dynamic. So no, if you don't have a realistic path to paying for something, don't put it in there.
Yeah.
Because people just get
I
frustrated.
just don't want to put the misconception out there to gain support of something based on one single entity of what they think may be included, or hope that it is included because of how impactful that inclusion would be to their lives. That's not fair of us to not clarify that when it was stated out there for the gain of support. I just want to be real clear on that, that's all.
Right, and those kinds of things, you would go back to the slide, you'd use the 40%. That expenditure would make, that kind of expenditure, you could use the money that goes to the general fund to pay for those kinds of improvements outside the zone. Right. That may be how you could pay for something like that.
Is there anything else you need from us for direction?
No, we could talk tours all night, but I know we all got other things to do, so I can.
Cut my mic off, I'm done.
No.
So we're gonna
This
go
is
forward
fine.
and put the public hearing, we're gonna publish it in the paper. We're gonna have it on the 20th. We'll have the ordinance at the 20th for first reading. And then you'll have.
Well, the preliminary plan, the preliminary project and finance plan done. You'll have, so the preliminary project and finance plan will be done. He'll write an ordinance that includes the justification and the finding for why this complies with state law. And then if you want me to come down before then, we can work on a date and I can meet with whomever, as many people.
We'll have something to you, hopefully tomorrow, we'll start communication with them.
Okay. So I would suggest that we do it at a more neutral site than just downtown. And invite anybody that would like to come. So it's more like an open house.
Are you gonna have wine?
No.
Oh.
Shelley, she's gonna have wine for you. Okay. Shelley has offered that we could do it at the chamber, and that might be a good idea, so it's more.
I'm okay with it.
More open to.
Open to the public. I think it's much information we can put out there.
Agreed.
And we need to push it, Shelley, if you can post it all over too.
Yes.
All right, I better
Okay.
stop so I don't get
Yeah.
yanked off. I will see y'all, I guess, in a couple weeks, and then I'll see you back on the 20th. But we'll get the plan done, the ordinance. We'll get you some numbers too, some different scenarios, and we'll kind of firm up what we think the developer is at least going to ask for, so you can weigh that information.
I'm sorry, on the ordinance, will that 70-30, 50-50, 60-40, will that have to be in the ordinance? So do we need three versions of the ordinance to look at for those numbers?
Because they
or-
want the scenario.
Can we just leave that part blank and then?
Yeah, I mean, it could be an addendum page.
I've got that section blank right now for y'all
Okay.
to fill in when y'all want to.
I don't want you to have to work 3 drafts of an ordinance, but like, I would like to see those numbers.
We'll get it.
Of what that would look like.
Do we need a motion to do that?
No, it's
No
just a
action
directive,
tonight.
so, thank you.
Thank y'all, see you in a
Okay.
couple weeks.
Yes.
Thanks, Travis.
Okay, we're going to agenda item number 12, provide the monthly city manager's report. No, it's not.
So we spent a lot of time on it first. I'm gonna give, Anthony a very few minutes to go over the engineering report. And then my report will be online tomorrow for everybody to see. It's much like the one we gave last week, but it's updated. So it'll be posted online. A few minutes.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, everybody. I'll be brief. So we went over a lot of the background information last council meeting. I'll just focus on the changes from the last report. The first project is the wastewater treatment plant 2023 plan improvements. So far, we've completed the installation of the grit screw system and the scraper system, which I understand has been down for a couple years. So that's hopefully a huge benefit for the workings of the wastewater treatment plant. They have constructed the 2-inch seal slab for the new digester and completed the installation of the electrical duct banks. They're preparing the commencement of the digester footing, the foundation for the office building. They're working on grit screw number 2 and continuing the dewatering and excavation of the new digester location. So for the GLO Community Development Block Grant drainage improvements, Project 1, trailer and Thule, that's currently on hold. I did get a late update on my way over here that they are preparing to buy the boxes for that project, so it looks like they're finishing up Project 5 and will be moving over to Project 1 soon. Project 4, South Ann and East Hackberry, has been completed. We're working on scheduling a walkthrough with our staff and city staff just to put our eyes on it, make sure there's nothing that's been left out of the plans. Project 5, Market at Church drainage improvements. They have completed the installation of the 30-inch RCP and the junction boxes and the outfall, and have completed the asphalt pavement repairs. Project 6, Savinol and Orleans Laurel and Magnolia. The city and the bonding company are working on the resolution discussions for the latent defect issues. FEMA, Enterprise and Maple drainage improvements. Every 2 weeks, we reach out to the grant managers and TDM asking for an update, getting the same story. FEMA doesn't answer to anybody, so we are poking and prodding gently to try to get information on that. Texas Department of Agriculture, Kluge Trail and Holly Road. We are currently under design. We are working on the engineer's letter report. We have completed the 811 locates, and the surveyors started on Monday of this week. They should be done middle of next week with the topographic survey. FEMA hazard mitigation. This is the generators applications. Again, FEMA, Q, haven't had a response from FEMA yet on that. I know the grant manager has looked at the grant portal on the 15th, 17th, and 18th of this month with no change in review status. The additional projects, Rockport wastewater treatment plant discharge permit renewal is 40% complete. We've completed the draft TCEQ forms, and we are coordinating with the plant operators and the testing lab for the effluent testing cost proposal to send to the city for review. That has to be completed, the complete discharge permit has to be completed by November 15th of this year. And we have completed a plat review for the Daniels Forest plat resubmission. I do have some photographs on the last page. So that's the digester seal slabs completed on the top left. The duct bank on the top right is prepared for concrete. That gets encased in concrete with a red ribbon over the top, so any future excavation is safe or noticed before any kind of disaster happens. The office foundation is on the middle left. They've got all the plumbing installed, working on getting a footer and subgrade prepped for the pour. On the right, middle right and bottom right, that's the grit screw that's been installed, and bottom left is another duct bank with that red ribbon. So it's all moving forward. We're watching it, making sure that it's going in right. Any questions? Thank you, guys.
Oh, looks good, thank you.
You got married since last time, right?
I did.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
She said yes.
Well, that's good.
It's always good.
And she showed up.
All right, we're gonna go to city council report. We're gonna start with you, Ward 1.
So I went to the RCAD meeting, Wednesday, July 17th. They are doing a lot of great things. There's a lot of upcoming events, a lot of pieces, movement going on over there. I did talk to Jennifer Day and ensure that during my time for report out, use it as a platform to share the things that are going on, provide an update, as well as share events. So she sent me just a little recap. RCAD has facilitated numerous meetings with the Bass family developers and the merchants organizations downtown. This has been great, giving the developers an opportunity to share that information directly to the merchants. So I do appreciate her assistance on that. That's probably about it for me.
Ward 2.
Ward 2, I was fortunate to speak with the folks over at the airport. The Wings Over Rockport project that is going to be an air show that they are trying to put together for 2025. They have a little fundraiser this Saturday. I'm going to attend. It's a little pancake breakfast thing there, a fundraiser for put together an air show here in Whitehaven. So if anybody can attend, I'm going to try to get there. I've never been to their, they do this breakfast thing fairly often. I haven't been yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And sounds like a neat project for the city and Ward 2. An air show would be kind of neato. They gave me some of the descriptions on some of the types of planes and all they want to get there. Sounds like a neat family event that they want to put on. That's next year, 2025. They got a bunch of money fundraising efforts going on. So this Saturday over at the airport.
Ward 3.
I was out of town for the last 3 weeks, so I really didn't do much around the city, but I had a great time in 7 states of the United States, so if you can, go to Montana. It's beautiful.
All right. Ward 4, I just, I had one meeting, I had the tree committee meeting, and so we meet once in a while, and they went over the water bags, and we also talked about, they have a large amount in their mitigation funds right now, so I asked for a workshop for the tree committee to come up with a list of stuff that they would like to utilize some of those funds for. It's not going to really hold on to that much if we can do things like buy trees and do things like anything. So we're going to come up with a list and get into front of the tree committee and come with recommendations for us. So that's about it.
Can we include parks in that workshop so they can
Yeah.
have some input on some of their wants or needs, please? Thank you.
All right. And now we're going to go into, I forgot I was in charge of that. Okay, and now we're going to executive session. The city council will recess its open meeting and reconvene an executive session pursuant to the Texas Government Code Section 551.071, consultations with attorney. Number 13, seek the advice of an attorney about pending or contemplated litigation or settlement offer, and on a matter in which the duty of the attorney to a governmental body under the Texas Customary Rules of Professional Conduct of the State Bar of Texas clearly conflicts with this chapter. 1, City Hall, 2, Concho Street, General Land Office, GLO, drainage projects, and 4, Data Pro Settlement. We are now into executive session. It's now 8:29. I'm now closing, we're now back from executive session, is now 9:20.
Motion to adjourn. No, it was me, I swear to God.
Second.
I didn't even have to take a breath to prepare for that.